Okay, good afternoon and welcome to our July 30th Audit Committee meeting. Roll call, please.
Audit Committee member Ed Khachadurian.
Here.
Tom O'Shaughnessy.
Present.
Alex Parahon.
Present.
Vahik Saturian is absent, and Chair Zare Amirian.
I am present. Let's move on to item number 2, please.
Item number 2 is the business agenda. The agenda for July 30th, 2020 Audit Committee meeting was posted on July 27th, 2020 on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Very good, thank you. Item number 3 is oral communications. I have no phone calls at the moment, but we will be flexible in that we want to invite participation from the public. So if we do get some phone calls, we can move that agenda item around as necessary. Let's move on to item number 4, please.
Item number 4 is the approval of the minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on April 30th, 2020.
I move to approve the minutes for April 30th.
Thank you, Mr. Parahon. Do I have a second? Mr. O'Shaughnessy seconds. Roll call, please.
Audit Committee member Ed Khachadurian.
Yes.
Tom O'Shaughnessy.
Yes.
Alex Parahon.
Yes.
Vahik Saturian is absent, and Chair Zare Amirian.
Yes. Item number 5. Item number 5, please.
Item number 5 is action items. A is election of the Audit Committee Chair.
Okay. So we'll open up the election to nominations.
I would like to move to continue the chair with our current chair.
I'll second that.
Okay. So we have a motion from Mr. O'Shaughnessy and a second from Mr. Khachaturian. Thank you. Any other nominations, please? Okay. Hearing none, are we sure? No other nominations? Okay. Hearing none, we will close the nominations. How do we do this? Is there a vote on it?
Would now vote, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Let's have a roll call, please.
Yes. Audit Committee member Khachadurian.
Yes.
Tom O'Shaughnessy.
Affirmative.
Alex Parahon.
I confirm.
Mr. Vahik Saturian is absent, and Chair Zare Amirian.
Yes, and thank you to my fellow committee members for their continued support in my leadership of the committee. I appreciate it very much. Let's move to action item 5B, please.
5B is election of the Audit Committee Secretary.
Okay, this is an interesting moment as our longtime secretary is secretarying her last meeting for us. Are you officially retired and you're just jumping in, or is the retirement upcoming?
Actually, this is my last day at work. Yeah, it's a bittersweet moment. I'm looking forward to retirement. I've worked for the city 37 years, and it's been wonderful years. I will miss everyone, and especially serving as the secretary to the Audit Committee, and I will miss everyone greatly. So with that, what can I say?
Well, on behalf of the entire committee, and I'm sure staff has had their opportunity to tell you, but on behalf of the entire committee, thank you so much for what you've done with preparing the minutes and making sure that we have orderly records of our doings and ongoings in this committee. 37 years of service, Ms. Chalaswanyan. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I know I don't
Yeah,
look
it
like
is.
it, but that's just a couple years less than I've been alive. So that's phenomenal, and we appreciate it very much.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
do we have a person of comparable experience in the queue to be nominated, or do we request the finance department to assign a pro tem secretary until we get this clarified?
Well, that's a very, very good question, Mr. O'Shaughnessy. I don't think there's anybody in the city that has comparable experience. So our only option, I think, is to have the IPA, assign a secretary as it finds, necessary from a pool of people whose cumulative experience might come close to approaching Ms. Chalaswanyan's. So, now maybe we could get some clarity from Ms. Vartanian about what our options are there. Lucy?
Could I make a motion that we refer this to the finance department and for now request a pro tem secretary in the next quarterly meeting?
Okay. Is that motion?
Jump in before that motion is made, if I could just jump in to
Yes.
provide some clarification. I understand that this was a matter that the city manager considered, and in trying to determine the best course of action, consulting both the IPA director and the finance director, made the determination that it would probably be best if it were assigned to the IPA, with the director having the discretion at each meeting and in the interim to provide those services with the utilization of her staff. So if the committee is so inclined, the appropriate motion would probably be to designate the IPA director or her designee as the secretary going forward until the position is either filled at the finance department or a different decision is made at the staffing level.
Okay, thank you very
Then
much.
I would amend my motion to replace with the wording just given.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, and that motion would be to have the director of the IPA or her assignee serve as secretary. Do I have a second?
I second that, Alex Farahone.
Okay, Mr. Parhone seconds. Roll call, please.
Audit Committee member Ed Khachadurian,
Yes.
Tom O'Shaughnessy,
Affirmative?
Alex Farahone,
Yes.
Vahid Saturian is absent, and Chair Zahir Amirian.
Yes. And, I mean, with that, I think your service, your fine service to the city is complete. Thank you. I mean, I'm not kicking you off the meeting, Ms. Jaroswine.
Yes, I'll continue this meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your service. And let's move on to item number 5C, please.
Yeah, 5C is annual report to City Council.
Okay. Every year we send a report as the Audit Committee to City Council, and I'd like to read this year's communication into the record. Dear Mayor Arajanian and City Council members, each year the Audit Committee must report our actions and activities to the City Council per Glendale Municipal Code Section 2.82.100. The purpose of this memo is to communicate our activities for the period of July 1st, 2019 to June 30, 2020. The Audit Committee met 4 times during fiscal year 2019-2020, where we were provided with financial and budgetary updates and internal audit activity reports. I am pleased to report that the Audit Committee continued to conduct all paperless meetings in keeping with the City Council's priorities of fiscal responsibility and sustainability. One of these 4 meetings was conducted with a combination of in-person and call-in due to COVID-19 social distancing requirements. The Audit Committee also modified our meeting time from the 4th Monday of the first month of each quarter at 8 a.m. to the 4th Thursday of the first month of each quarter at 2 p.m., effective January 2020, with the intent of inviting more public participation with an afternoon time slot. The Audit Committee assists the City Council by reviewing financial information and management reports and by providing independent recommendations regarding the scope, priority, and methods of audit-related activities within the city. Despite the evolving situation with the COVID-19 pandemic, the Audit Committee continued to carry out our responsibilities during this unprecedented time. Further, we requested internal audit to conduct an audit of the city's pandemic response plan to ensure that the city has an effective plan in place to protect human lives and businesses within Glendale from COVID-19 and any future disasters. At this unique time, the Audit Committee is leveraging the internal audit function of the city to ensure the public is informed and assured on the city's management of this situation and preparedness of any future events. The financial activities by the Audit Committee include received audit communications from Vavernick, Trine Day and Company, LLP on their responsibility, scope, and activities for the annual audit of the city for the period ending June 30th, 2019. Number 2, received and reviewed the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, CAFR, for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019. Number 3, approved and recommended to City Council White Nelson Deal Evans LLP as the city's new external auditor for the fiscal years ending June 30th, 2020 through 2022. I, as the Audit Committee Chair, also participated in the external auditor selection interview process by providing feedback to the selection team. Number 4, received financial and budgetary reports from the Finance Department and City Management. The internal audit activities by the Audit Committee include 1, received and reviewed the fiscal year 2019-20 internal audit annual work plan and monitored progress in addressing the risk priorities for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. Modified the financial year 2019-20 annual work plan by requesting the addition of an audit project on the city's emergency response plan. 2, reviewed internal audit reports as they were issued, were briefed on all completed audit assignments by internal audit staff and department representatives, reviewed the progress of quarterly follow-up activities, and discussed the action plan related to outstanding audit issues reaching specified criteria. 3, monitored the types of projects performed by internal audit staff to ensure ongoing independence in the internal audit function. The Audit Committee members wish to express our appreciation to city staff that support our efforts and keep us informed of events and issues in the city. We look forward to continuing to serve the interests of the city of Glendale in the coming year. Respectfully submitted by myself as the chair of the Audit Committee and on behalf of Audit Committee members Ed Khachadurian, Thomas O'Shaughnessy, Alejandro Parajon, and Vaik Satrian. I believe we need a motion in order to submit that as read.
I, Alex Barone, motion to submit this as read.
Thank you, Mr. Parhon. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Mr. Hachdourian. Roll call, please.
Audit Member Ed Khachaturian,
Yes.
Tom O'Shaughnessy,
Affirmative.
Alex Barahon,
Yes.
Vahik Saturian is absent, and Chair Zari Amirian.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item number 6. I'm going to make a little bit of a change in order here. I'm going to move 6D first, and then 6C second, and then we'll have 6A, B, and E. So item number 6D, please.
Yes, number 6D, reports and information. Report from White Nelson Bill Evans LLP on the audit of fiscal year ended June 30, 2020. Michelle Flynn, Director of Finance.
Good afternoon, Chair Marion and members of the committee. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Alwyn De Leon. He's one of our accounting managers that lead the accounting section. He will give a brief intro for you and turn it over to Daphne Munoz, who's a partner with White Nelson. So I'll let Alwyn go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is Alwyn De Leon, and I'm one of the accounting manager and finance department. I will present to you the information about the city's audit of fiscal year ended June 30, 2020. The city has engaged a new external auditor, White Nelson Dill Evans, LLP, WNDE for short, starting fiscal year 2020 for the next 3 years, and with the option to extend for additional 3 years. For the fiscal year 2020 audit, WNDE staff performed their preliminary fieldwork, which started on the week of June 22nd for 2 weeks. Prior to their preliminary fieldwork, WNDE's senior audit manager met with various department sections such as purchasing, accounts payable, human resources, payroll, CWP utility customer services section, and the city treasurer's office via teleconference meetings, and discussed each section's internal control and operations procedures. The city planned to submit the single audit to WNDE by late September, but the single audit may get delayed this year because of late compliance issues of COVID-19 federal funding from governing agencies and yet to be determined. When the first draft of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, CAFR, is completed by mid-October, WNDE staff will perform their final fieldwork starting the week of October 12th for 3 weeks to complete the audit. We expect to get the opinion letter from WNDE on the last week of November and present the CAFR to the City Council in early December. We'll be back to the Audit Committee next January to present the audit results and the CAFR. So now I would like to introduce Daphne Munoz, partner of White Nelson Dill Evans LLP, to present their audit plan for fiscal year ended June 30, 2020. Thank you, Chair and committee members.
Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Glad to be here to join you virtually to present to discuss the fiscal year 2020 audit. I prepared a brief presentation that will cover the scope of our services, our responsibilities as auditors, the management's responsibility with regards to the financial statements and internal controls, and our audit team and the timing of our audit.
And Ms. Munoz, if you'll just introduce yourself for the record, please.
Oh, Again, Daphne Munoz from White Nelson D11, the partner on the engagement for the audit this year.
Thank you.
So for this year, White Nelson D11 was hired to perform the following services. We will perform a financial audit of the financial statements of the City of Glendale, for which will be included in the comprehensive annual financial report, commonly referred to as the CAFR. We will perform a compliance audit on federal expenditures, and this is commonly referred to as the single audit of federal grants. We will also do an audit of the financial statements of the electric utility and water utility funds. We will review the compliance with SB Senate Bill 341 of the Housing Successor Annual Report. We will perform an agreed upon procedures report on the Federal Transit Administration report that's going to be reported to the National Transit Database. We will be performing a certification of the annual report related to Section 8 that will be submitted to HUD through their Real Estate Assessment Center Financial Assessment Subsystem, commonly referred to as REACT. And lastly, we will be performing an audit of the financial statements of the ICI system, JPA, and if necessary, a single audit of the JPA's federal expenditures. So our main responsibility with regards to the audit is to form and express an opinion on whether the financial statements that are prepared by the management are presented fairly in conformity with GAAP. Our audit will be performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and generally accepted government auditing standards. We will be designing our audit to obtain reasonable assurance rather than absolute assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatements. I'm going to highlight the term reasonable assurance, and that is the reason for that, because we will not be testing 100% of the transactions during the year. Therefore, we will not be able to provide an assurance that 100% of the financial statements are accurate. Our audit will be performed on a test basis. Therefore, we will only be able, we're designing it to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatements. Our audit will include consideration of the internal controls over financial reporting as a basis for designing our audit procedures that will be appropriate in these circumstances, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on those financial statements, on the effectiveness of the city's internal control over financial reporting. We will also be, our audit will also include performing tests of compliance with city's compliance with certain provisions of laws, regulations, contracts, and agreements such as purchasing policy, investment policy. Again, the objective of our tests is not to provide an opinion on the compliance with these provisions, rather than as a basis for designing our audit procedures. If matters related to the financial statements audit that are in our judgment will be relevant to the responsibilities of those in charge with governance in overseeing the financial reporting process, we will communicate those significant matters as they happen. Our audit does not relieve the management and those charging governance with their responsibilities, for which includes the preparation of the financial statements, the adoption of sound internal controls, the design and adherence to those internal controls, and providing information for our audit, including written representations at the conclusion of our audit. I'd like to briefly introduce the audit team that is assigned to this engagement this year. We will have myself as an engagement partner, and Mr. Nitin Patel is another engagement partner in the engagement. We will also have Mr. Robert Callanan as our technical review partner. He will be reviewing all the issues that we will be issuing, all the reports that we will be issuing to make sure that they meet all the technical requirements, as well as he will be in charge in reviewing our work papers to make sure that we meet our internal quality control procedures. Ms. Stephanie Fung is a senior manager. She will be in charge of the entire audit team. Ms. Brittany Mello is a manager. She will be the one who will be supervising our staff auditors that are on field, which will be up to 3 staffs that will be on the field. I think Alwyn already discussed briefly our timing. We've already performed our interim audit, for which we did some planning, inquiry, and documentations of internal controls. As Alwyn said, we started around in April with our discussions and interviews of internal controls, and we're at the city the week of June 22nd and for 2 weeks to perform our test of controls. During that time, we did gather information regarding the city, its environment, evaluate the design of those controls to make sure that the city is adhering to them as they were represented to us. Again, the specific areas of that we've reviewed include accounts payable and cash disbursement processes, accounts receivable, cash receipts, utility billing, payroll disbursements, investment compliance. We reviewed the city minutes as well to make sure that if there were any major transactions or agreements that were entered into that were relevant to our audit. In October, we will be back for our final field work, which based on our interim field work and based on our risk assessment, we will be performing account analysis of the balances that we have identified that are depending on the significant risk that we have identified. In October also, as Alwyn mentioned, we will be given the preliminary draft of the comprehensive annual financial report, for which we will be reviewing. It will be including the introductory section, the financial section, statistical section, and we're scheduled we plan to issue our report at the end of November. The last couple of slides just talk about the new pronouncements that are in effect for this year and the upcoming year. For the fiscal year 2020, the only GASB pronouncement that is in effect is 95. And basically 95 is, it paused and extended the implementation of all outstanding GASB statements to provide relief in light of COVID-19. So in short, there are no new pronouncements that needs to be implemented this year. Next year, the big ones, one of the big statements that the city has to implement is the Fiduciary Activities. And this statement establishes the criteria for identifying fiduciary activities, and it focuses on the critical the criteria that generally whether a government is controlling the assets of a fiduciary activity. And if it meets that criteria, then those should be reported in the fiduciary fund of the financial statements. During 2021, the city will also have to implement GASB 90 and 92. In fiscal year 2022, another big one that the city have to implement is GASB 87 with regards to leases. This requires the recognition of certain leased assets and liabilities for leases that previously were classified as operating leases. It establishes a single model with accounting based on the foundational principles that leases are financing of right to use an underlying asset. And under this agreement, the lessees are required to recognize a lease liability and an intangible right to use asset. And on the flip side, a lessor is required to recognize lease receivable and deferred inflows. This statement really enhances the relevance and consistency of information about government's leasing activity. Also in fiscal year 22, GASB 89, this is one of the rare pronouncements where GASB actually tells the stakeholders to stop doing something. Basically, 89 requires that interest costs that used to be capitalized during a construction period now has to be reported as an expense for the period. During fiscal year 22, the city will also have to implement GASB 93, which is the replacement of the LIBOR rates with the LIBOR expected to cease at the end of 2022. This statement just replaced for financial instruments for where there's a reference to LIBOR to change the reference rate or adding or changing a fallback provision for the reference rate. 22, there's GASB 97 as well. And lastly, on fiscal year 23, there's just these three statements that the city has to implement: 91 for conduit debt obligations, 94 for public-private and public-public partnerships, and 96 a subscription-based information technology arrangement. Well, that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer, and I'm going to end my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz. Let's open it up to any questions from the committee.
Mr. Miriam, this is a Kashidurian. I would like to ask just one question.
Yes, Mr. Hashidurian, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Munoz, for your presentation. I just have a quick question regarding the scope of services. And that goes back to the single audit that you mentioned. I think it was on the very first slide that you provided. Are there going to be more than one single audit? Because I think you mentioned something about conducting a single audit on the federal grants, and then the last item I forgot. I think I wrote down ICIS JPA. Could you just maybe explain how that works? Like those are separate audits, or is just the one audit now encompasses that as well?
Yeah, so we do have to perform a separate audit for the ICIS JPA, and they themselves get federal grants, so they actually have to have their own single audit. So that is, again, I think the last conversation I had with Mr. Inde is that the ICIS JPA, ICI system JPA this year is not going to have more than $750,000 in federal expenditures. Therefore, they are not required to have a single audit.
Oh, I see. So it's not 100% yet?
It's not 100% yet.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, one quick question.
Yes, Mr. O'Shaughnessy, go ahead, please.
On the new GASB on leases, does that include any changes in how the leases were put out to bid, or just the fiscal handling of the lease?
Well, I think that is a management decision as far as the way the GASB does not have any requirement that you have to change the way you are putting out arrangements for your leases the way they stand right now. It's purely just for financial reporting purposes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, if we have no further questions, thank you, Ms. Munoz.
Thank you.
Let's move on to item number 6C, please.
Number 6C is fiscal year 2020-21 city budget adoption update. Michelle Flynn, Director of Finance.
Yes, good afternoon again, Chair Marion, members of the committee. I'm going to introduce Mari Kamarian. She is our budget manager and oversees the entire budget process under Deputy Director Audit Finance. So Mari will walk you through the information that was presented to City Council on June 2nd for adoption of the budget for this fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Audit Committee. My name is Mari Kramian. I am the Budget Manager at the City's Administrative Services Finance Department, and I will be giving a brief overview on the fiscal year 2021 adopted budget. If I could get the next slide, please. So I will be briefly covering the budget adoption calendar. Then we will be looking at the adopted fiscal year 2021 appropriations for all city funds, as well as the Measure S approved programs and projects. Next slide, please. So for the fiscal year 2021 budget, we had a total of 3 budget study sessions, which were all held in May, covering various topics, including the general fund budget, COVID-19 related financial impacts, departmental dashboards, the CIP program, as well as Measure S funding. And following the study sessions was the budget hearing and the adoption, which were both held on the same night on June 2nd. Next slide, please. So this slide illustrates the fiscal year 1920 and 2021 adopted budgets for the various citywide fund categories. The city's primary fund is the general fund, which was adopted with a total budget of $250 million. This amount does include the Measure S sales tax funded appropriation, which you will see in more detail in the following slides. However, the general fund portion itself shows an increase of $1.8 million over the prior fiscal year. And this is mainly due to increases in various salaries and benefits categories, such as PERS and medical expenses, as well as increases in contractual services. However, these increases are offset by $5 million in vacancy savings, which was incorporated in this year's budget as a result of a hiring freeze for the city's vacant positions that was put in place. Looking at the special revenue funds, which mostly include the city's grant funds, the budget for this category was adopted at $114.7 million, which is an increase of approximately $5.1 million due to primarily the additional revenues to be received in various grant funds, since most of these funds are revenue driven. For debt service, the city only has one fund, which is used for recording the principal and interest payments on the police building bond. The total adopted budget was approximately $3.3 million, which is a slight decrease from the prior year. Moving on to capital improvement funds, which hold most of the city's capital projects. The total adopted budget was $25 million, which includes the capital improvement portion of the approved Measure S appropriation, which, as I mentioned, you will see in more detail in the following slide. The proprietary funds include funds that have more business-like operations. They include the enterprise funds as well as the internal service funds. For the enterprise funds, this includes electric, water, sewer, and refuse, just to name a few of the major ones. The total adopted budget for this category is $348 million, which represents a decrease of $32 million from prior fiscal year. And this is mainly due to less new appropriation being added towards water and electric capital projects, as well as the reduction in the purchase power budget over the prior fiscal year. And lastly, the internal service funds, which include funds that provide services to other city departments, such as workers' compensation, liability, ISD, and building maintenance funds. The total adopted fiscal year 2021 budget is $115.2 million, which is an increase of about $3.4 million from prior year. So this increase is mainly due to higher medical rates, as well as increases in claims expenses for the liability fund. So in total, the adopted fiscal year 2021 budget is $906.8 million, representing a decrease of $31.6 million over the prior fiscal year. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a list of programs and projects that were approved by the City Council to be funded by the Measure S sales tax revenue. A total of $12.7 million was approved for the housing category programs, including affordable housing development, various assistance programs, primarily for rental assistance, as well as the rental rights programs. And this year, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Council approved an allocation of $3.6 million towards commercial economic recovery programs, which include programs such as the Alfresco Glendale, Small Business Recovery Assistance, and personal protective equipment for business needs. For recreation, City Council approved $1 million to be used towards recreational land acquisition, and another $582,000 towards the year-round aquatics program expansion. And lastly, the infrastructure, Council approved funding for two studies, the citywide traffic study and the Verdugo Wash Greenway feasibility study. So in total, approximately $18.7 million in Measure S appropriation was approved as part of the fiscal year 2021 budget. Next slide, please. So this concludes my presentation. I will gladly answer any questions that the Audit Committee may have. Thank you.
Thank
I have
you.
one question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. O'Shaughnessy?
Is there any schedule to reopen the budget given congressional action from the Senate and the House if they end up with additional funds appropriated that would include monies to local government?
Well, our city budget, we are always open to making amendments. So during the year after adoption, we do take our budget to council on a quarterly basis, where if there are any amendments that city council chooses to make, they can make during those quarterly meetings. However, even for this year, city council had asked staff to bring back reports on a monthly basis because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are taking now reports back to council on a monthly basis, and if there are any changes that need to be made to the budget, they can certainly be made during those meetings.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Any other questions?
Chairman Amiri, this is Ed Cachadorian. I have a quick question.
Yes, Mr. Cachadorian.
The citywide traffic study, is this, maybe could you just shed some light on, when this is going to be implemented? I'm asking this question not from the perspective of the allocation of the funds, but, we are now living in a kind of under abnormal circumstances, and the traffic probably is not, I'm not exactly sure what the purpose of this study is, but like the traffic, probably the situation is going to be different compared to a normal situation. Do you have any information as far as when this study is going to be implemented?
As part of when it will be implemented, I do not have the information. It was approved for the fiscal year 2021 budget, so Public Works staff would have to take a report to council with more information regarding the traffic study. However, I do know that the purpose of this study is to assess traffic growth and to evaluate the citywide traffic flow, as well as to propose traffic congestion countermeasures.
Chair.
But exactly when it will be implemented, I do not know at this time.
Chair, Amiri,
Yes, Mr. Golian. Thank you. Mr. Golian.
yeah, Chair, Amiri, and members of the committee, committee member Khachatorian, for the exact reasons that you noted, we have postponed the initiation of this traffic study, the mere fact that the traffics are not at their normal levels. So we're just waiting with our fingers crossed. As soon as traffic gets back to some kind of normalcy, then we can initiate this process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Golian. Any other questions on that? Mr. Parahon, did I hear you?
Yeah, I actually have a question on Measure S funding. Is there any, in that rule in Measure S, is there anything that it requires a independent citizen oversight committee?
In order to appropriate funding, you mean, for members?
Well, because I know that City Council is the one that actually makes the decisions on how funding is going to be allocated. But at the same time, isn't there a oversight committee seeing Measure S funding, making sure that it's being utilized to, obviously properly, and oversee that, making sure that whatever the citizens of Glendale have voted for are being properly done?
One second.
Chair, this is Michelle Flynn, Director of
Yes,
Finance.
Ms. Flynn.
Committee Member Parhon, the accounting that we do for all of the Measure S programs are set up in such a way that the allocation of the expenses for those individual programs are isolated specific for that program. All of those costs are subject to our annual audit by our external auditors. but council has not established an independent committee to oversee any of that at this point. We do provide in our quarterly report and now monthly reports to council a status on all Measure S programs, on the revenues received, as well as the expenditures that have been incurred on each of those individual programs to date. I hope that
but aren't there any sort of requirements needed to have another oversight committee overseeing these funds from Measure S?
No, I believe the way the measure was written and the way it was set up, there was no requirement for that to be in place. Council could, if they chose to, establish one, I believe, but there is no requirement for the way it was established. No.
That is accurate.
Mr. Goulian, yeah. Now, would that be in our purview if we chose to take a look at some aspect of that in terms of the audit committee and the internal audit function? Ms. Flynn?
Yes, if internal audit would want to look at that from the standpoint of the expenditures that are being charged to those programs, absolutely, they could.
Any other
I think
questions?
that would be a good idea to kind of suggest to council if the internal audit or audit committee can actually see these, because obviously the general public wants to make sure that these are properly being handled.
Mr. Parhon, can you be a little bit more detailed for me? When you say see these, what are you referring to?
Sorry, I'm keeping muting myself here. So the measure itself, I think we need to somehow have council maybe provide some sort of approval for internal audit to, is there an approval required for internal audit to be able to oversee that and audit it as well, or no? There's no need for approval for that?
Well, internal audit would not oversee it. Their role would be if they elected or put it on their work plan, they would be able to look at the expenditures that are being charged to those programs that City Council has approved and make sure that they're all categorized correctly and that we're accounting for them correctly. But as far as oversight of that, it would not be internal audit's function to provide oversight for that. That's my role as the Director of Finance.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Parhon. Any further questions?
Chair Miriam, this is Ed Kachadurian. I have another question.
Yes, Mr. Kachadurian.
I see, based on the numbers that is reported on this slide, that in 2020-21, the total Measure S budget has decreased by, or the projection is that there will be a decrease of almost 40%. Is that an accurate? So I guess my question is that if the projections are for some reason different, or they either materialize or not materialize, what is going to happen to the to the project? How will the city cope with that?
Well, go ahead, Mari.
Okay. So with Measure S, fiscal year 19-20 was the first year for us in implementing Measure S funds. So at the time, it was estimated that we would be receiving about $30 million annually that would go towards Measure S. And based on that estimate, council directed that towards different various programs and projects. However, that being our first year, we are now realizing that it's going to be a little lower than the $30 million. And on top of that, we also had the COVID-19 pandemic effect. So it's even lower than what it should be. So based on that, we have adjusted the 2021 revenues to where exactly it's tracking towards. And that is why you're seeing the reduction in the appropriations, because that entire $30 million that we initially thought we were going to receive annually, it's going to be about $22 million or so instead for 2021. And the City Council can choose to appropriate that entire amount during the budget process, or also to appropriate a portion of it and let the remaining sit in its fund balance. And they can appropriate it the following year or in the future outer years.
So is it safe to say that the majority of the decrease, the $31 million in the total funds, a big portion of it comes from the expected reduction in the Measure S revenues?
Correct.
But it is disproportionately affecting the enterprise funds, right?
Not the enterprise fund. So the general fund and a portion of it goes into the capital improvement fund because if council decides to put it towards capital improvement, yes, such as even like purchasing property or anything like that gets added to the capital fund instead of the general fund.
Okay. Thank you. No more questions for me, Chair Marion.
Thank you.
Chair Marion, if I may.
Yes.
This is Michelle Flynn again. Just so that everyone understands, when we are receiving the Measure S funding from the state in our sales tax allocation, it comes to us separately from our regular sales tax. So we're able to identify what that amount is very easily from the state. It gets deposited in a certain program for accounting purposes, and then all of the programs and projects that City Council has approved are also set up in such a way that we can account for them separately in the books. Any leftover funding that Council has approved in any year that is not spent will roll over on certain projects, and then Council also then that next year during the budget process can de-appropriate it if they choose, or reappropriate it again, and in some cases those projects are continuing, such as the monthly housing subsidy. That is a continuation of a project, so we've appropriated that up front in last year, and anything new or anything left over just rolls over to the following years, so it stays in those buckets.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Flynn. Now, just a quick question. How does the city, or how often does the city look at the accuracy of the funds collected through the sales tax measures?
So the state remits the monies collected, and we have our consultant, HDL, as part of the work that they do for us in providing the information on the reporting, as well as what the economic outlook looks like for us and our projections on sales tax. They also audit sales tax generators within the city, and they go through their own metrics on how they determine who to audit, and then they look at that for us. And any findings from that, we obviously would receive. They work with the state board on a regular basis with all their clients to get that information in order to do their audits.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, if we have no further questions, let's move on. I did say we would go to 5A, but I'd like to actually go to 6A. I'd like to go to 6E, please.
Okay, 6B.
6E, I'm sorry, 6E.
Okay, 6E is Audit Committee member attendance. Rubik Golanian, Assistant City Manager.
Good afternoon again, Chair Amirian, members of the committee. In response to the Audit Committee's question at the last meeting, we have looked at Mr. Satorian's record of attendance, and it appears that based on our city code, the number of missing scheduled meetings constitutes grounds for removal from the Audit Committee. And as such, we have spoken with the council member who appointed Mr. Satorian, and this council member is actively pursuing a replacement. This council member has already interviewed one person, and I'm confident that he should be able to find a qualified candidate to be appointed before the next committee meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gulayan. I mean, is there any action that the committee needs to undertake, or is that just something that the council member in question is going to take care of themselves by choosing to remove the member and then appointing another person?
Chair Marion, there is no specific action that's needed by the audit committee to be taken per se. In the old days, per our code, these matters didn't happen frequently, but when it did, they were referred to an ad hoc committee that constituted a couple of members from the audit committee. But over the last many years, we have left it upon the discretion of the appointing council member who pursues replacement as they see fit.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And let me just be clear. I know Mr. Saturian, and while I haven't had an opportunity to speak with him directly regarding this particular issue, it's difficult not having the ability to, kind of give your side. We're in a difficult situation. Two of the meetings, have happened during this COVID-19 issue. So, in no way would I want there to be necessarily a specter of some wrongdoing on Mr. Saturian's part. I'm sure that he has his reasons. It's just that as a committee, we need as many eyes, qualified eyes on these issues as possible. And I think, I thank Mr. Parajon for bringing this up during our last meeting. And I think I speak on behalf of the committee when we say we would really encourage the council member to move hastily to replace that member.
Yes, absolutely. And just to provide more specific information, so for the future, so the committee members know, according to our code, if a committee member or a commissioner misses 75% of the scheduled meetings within a given year, or 3 consecutive scheduled meetings back to back, obviously, then that's the grounds for a removal.
Very good. Any of the committee members have anything to add to that or questions regarding that?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
Committee Member O'Shaughnessy, I think in fairness it would be appropriate for the Audit Committee to thank the soon-to-be former member for his service and wish him well.
So thanked. Yeah. And I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. Mr. Saturian did attend 2 meetings, and we appreciate his contributions to the Audit Committee. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Gulayan. Let's move on to item number 6A, please.
6A is Internal Audit Activity Report as of 6/30/2020, Jessie Zhang, Internal Audit Manager.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Audit Committee members. Jessie Zhang, Internal Audit Manager. This afternoon, I would like to provide you a report on the internal audit activities for the quarter ended June 30th, 2020. There are 7 sections within this report. The first one is completed project. We have completed 3 in this past quarter, and we also prepared 3 PowerPoint presentations to report the audit result to you. So at this time, I would like to invite our Senior Internal Auditor, Samuel Salim, to present his 2 audit reports The first one is a compliance audit related to Hoover Capital Recycled Water Line project, and then followed by the Pci Compliance Audit. So this is actually the first virtual audit conducted by Internal Audit. So Samil is very excited to present this audit to you. So let me just because most of the committee members and the staff are joining on WebEx, so we would like to ask you please wait till the Q&A section at the end of the presentation to ask your questions. Thank you. Bring up the PowerPoint right now.
Mr. Salim,
Hi. Can you guys hear me okay?
loud and clear.
All right. So, Jess, you're going to pull up the
I'm working on
presentation?
Hold on.
Okay. Okay.
He is excited.
All right.
Excellent. All right. So good afternoon, Chairman Mirian and fellow Audit Committee members. My name is Camille Salim, and I'm going to be going over the findings of my Hoover, Toll, and Keppel Recycled Water Project audit. Just to start off, I do get some freezing or some network issues, so if I do, I may cut off video. And if you could hear me and if you can hear me and I'm rambling on, just make a hand gesture or something so I could, I'll try to fix it. Okay, with that said, let's get straight to the project background. So, Proposition 84 was passed a number of years back, and it essentially provided $1.5 billion statewide to be used for water supply, reliability, conservation, and efficiency projects. This particular project was for, as the title kind of alludes to, was for 3 schools: Herbert Hoover High School, Eleanor Toll Middle School, and Mark Keppel Elementary School. You can go to the next bullet, Jesse. So all 3 of these schools obviously have huge lawns like most schools do, and so they're watering them currently using normal water. And so the project was to provide approximately 6,000 linear feet of recycled water pipelines to the schools so that they could then take advantage of recycled water instead of the normal water that they're using. And on an annual basis, they anticipated approximately, it would save 55 acre feet per year of regular water usage. So we applied for the grant, Proposition 84 grant, and we were preliminarily approved. And so the estimated cost at that time, which was a few years back, was $2.6 million. And so the grant was supposed to fund 1.7 of that, and the remaining 900,000 was supposed to be self-funded by the city. Next one, Stephanie. And the different thing about this project, it's a totally normal convention, but just to bring everyone up to speed, because I wasn't aware, is that so they built it using a method called design-build construction. And design-build construction is essentially where you cut out usually a project, you have a designer do one project, and you have a contractor do the actual building. And so there's like a separation. But with design-build, one contractor does both the design aspect and the building. And one of the benefits of this is that it eliminates the possible he said, she said afterwards if there's any kind of hiccups, because one person did all aspects, so they're responsible for all aspects of the project. Next slide, please. And so the objective of the audit was to determine whether the contract provisions were appropriately followed and the costs were eligible for grant reimbursement. The scope was the Hoover, Toll, and Keppel water project between sorry, I forgot to mention that before. So there was the contractor that was awarded the contract was called, we call them JDC. And then, so that contract makes up a vast majority of the total project cost. So we focused on the contract between the city and that contract. Next slide, please. So the audit process, we interviewed GWP personnel regarding the project.
We obtained and reviewed applicable project documentation. Can you go a couple bullets, Jesse? We performed detailed test work on JDC invoices since that was the focus of the audit. And then we performed a limited review of the Prop 84 just to determine what are the reimbursement requirements. And then lastly, we researched best practice documentation for design build contracts. Can you go forward a couple, Jesse, please? And we can go to the next slide. So the project is relatively straightforward. The project went well. The project was completed December 2017. It was completed on schedule. It was completed under budget. 1.9 million was the actual cost versus the 2.6 million that we actually anticipated. So the design build went successfully. However, the big issue with this is that the schools, next bullet please, Jesse. The schools haven't actually built the pipeline necessary to connect to the pipelines that we built up to the school. So the project hasn't really resulted in any water savings. Although the capability is there, the schools just haven't done their part yet. So regarding the grant funding status, it's still in process. We're still in negotiating with them, but the state appears to have been indicated that they're going to honor the full grant amount, even though the total cost came in lower. But again, we don't know what impact of the schools not connecting will have on the grant. They may require it to take place before grant funding takes place. We just don't know at this point. So that was pretty much the highlights. Next slide, please. So we had a total of 2 findings, and one is what I just alluded to. So the project's goal was to actually build pipelines, which we did, but ultimately the purpose was to save water, which it didn't because the schools didn't do their part. And part of the reason that I believe that may have taken place was because when we built the project, we didn't actually have something in writing from the school saying, yes, I commit to build the pipelines. Once you do X, we'll do Y. So that didn't take place up front. There were obviously some informal conversations that took place, which led us to do what we did, but there was nothing formally in writing there. So that's number one. And so our recommendation was, just to deal with the schools and try to get this going. The second one is a small finding. So we have to report total costs to the state on the project, and at the time of my review, the total costs were underreported by about $13,000. And so we recommended that they just fix the reporting, and obviously they said they did. It's not going to materially impact the project, but it was a correction nonetheless. So those were the 2 findings I had. The project, if you just look at it from the point of view of the design build contract and what did the contractor do, it went well. If you look at it from the point of the actual goal of the project, obviously there's some issues with this on the schools aspect of it. Next. So with that, I'll take any questions you may have. The GWP Assistant General Manager, Michael DeGhetto, is also, I believe he called in, and he could also chime in if there's anything that I can answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
Am I correct, as I memorized and looked at the changing screen, if the state goes with the original total grant amount, that we could be saving $500,000 of city expenses by the decrease in total cost?
Yeah, that's a possibility, yes. But again, that's not, that's all still in the works. But yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Maybe Michael could chime in a little bit more on that one.
No, we'll just cross our fingers, I have a feeling. Thank you.
Any other questions regarding this? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Salim.
All right, all right.
Next, next audit, please.
Okay. That's me again, Jesse, right? PCI?
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on.
What?
It up.
No problem. All right, so here we go. So the next audit is the PCI Compliance Audit. Next slide. So before we start, let's just define some of these acronyms that are going to be used. The first one, obviously, is PCI, which stands for Payment Card Industry. And then the next one is Data Security Standards, DSS. Those are just the standards that govern the payment card industry. And so when you combine them to the standards are generally referred to as PCI DSS. You just combine the two. Next slide, please. So the PCI Security Standards Council is the governing body that makes up these standards. And they're made up of all the major credit card holders, MasterCard, Visa, American Express, Discover, JCB. So they all got together and developed these standards to have some type of uniform standards to govern data security for credit cards, basically. Next slide. So the PCI DSS standards applies to all entities that store and process, transmit cardholder data. And I'll define what cardholder data is a little bit later. All merchants are required to demonstrate varying levels of compliance depending on their activity levels. The more activity you have, the more robust compliance requirements you have. And essentially, they're composed of 12 requirements that mirror common sense, best practice security standards. And I'll also get into that a little bit later. Next slide, please. So this is obviously a credit card that we're all familiar with, but it's just to define what is payment card data when I talk about that. So, so there are a number of elements on a credit card, and so some that you're allowed to keep and some that you are not. So the first one highlighted in red here are all the elements of a credit card that nobody can keep under any circumstances. Your chip information, your 3-digit code, your magnetic strip, all of these things, no merchant can keep these under any circumstances. Next one. This one. So, and then this is your personal account number. That's what's called the 2S PAN. It's a 16-digit credit card number we all have. So this generally, we shouldn't keep it. We definitely cannot keep it in written form. But if we do keep it, we need to keep it in an encrypted format. So, for example, when you have a credit card on file with Amazon and Google Pay, Apple Pay, they keep your number, but they're allowed to keep it because it's encrypted. But just to keep things simple, when in doubt, it's better not to keep it just to avoid that exposure. Next slide, please. Okay, so this, like your name and expiration date, these you are allowed to keep just for identification purposes. And you know, when you call, they may, just to go back a little bit, the PAN you can keep like the last 4 digits of the account number. You just can't keep the full thing. So that in combination with the name and expiration date, we are allowed to keep. So that's your payment card data and what's allowed to be kept and what's not allowed to be kept. And then, so that's the thrust of what PCI compliance is all about, is how do you safeguard this data? Next slide. So these are the 12 PCI DSS requirements. There's no way in God's earth you're going to remember all this, but I'm just going to highlight a few of them just to give you an idea like how it's common sense. Like number one is to install and maintain a firewall that you know, blocking the public from your systems. Number three, protect stored cardholder data. Number four, encrypt transmission of your cardholder data when it's on networks. 7, 8, 9, you know, authenticate your components, restrict access to your data, only keep data to those who need to know, and keep it away from everybody else. Number 12, maintain a policy that governs your overall governance structure. So again, it's just general sense guidelines. The actual specifics of this can get quite complicated, obviously, depending on the software or the actual application. But the actual goal is, I think we could all get a pretty good understanding of what they're shooting for at least. Next slide, please.
Am I correct?
Yes.
Am I correct that
Mr. Ashasi,
items 10 and 11 would be?
Mr.
sorry.
Ashasi, can you hold the question until after
I just realized that. Yes, I apologize.
Oh, no worries.
Oh, no problem.
Worries.
No problem. Are we good?
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead, please.
Okay, sorry. So the PCI compliance level, so there's essentially, when I referred to before, that there are varying levels of compliance requirements depending on your activity levels. So there's 4 levels. Level 4 is your smallest, under 20,000 credit card transactions a year. Level 1 is the highest, 6 million plus. So we process about 2 million transactions a year, which makes us a level 2 merchant. So level 2, 3, 4 all have a requirement that we're required to submit self-assessment questionnaires. However, to do that, they must be done by certified internal security assessors. It's basically a certification that no one within the city has. So we went out and hired an external, they're called a QSA, Quality Security Assessor, to perform an assessment for the city, and they gave us a full report on compliance, pretty much your full clean bill of health, which is the highest compliance level we could get. So that's what we did back in 2019, last year. So why do we care about PCI after saying that? First and foremost, like I said, it's a requirement. Secondly, the Security Council can impose fines and penalties, which normally happens to a lot of companies that are found to be negligent. And those fines and penalties can be quite large. Third is the termination of the ability to accept credit card payments. So it is a very big deal for us to be able to do our day-to-day services that we provide if we lose that, obviously. And finally, I mean, given there is a lot of work that goes into this from the external QSA, from internal audit, looking at it, from all the safeguards, but the cost of a breach, potential breach far exceeds any prevention costs. As a matter of fact, next slide, please. In 2019, IBM did a study, and the average data breach cost per company in the United States is $8 million. And that's because every breach you do, I mean, just think of the cost. You have to get credit monitoring for them, which is, at least $7,500 per record. You have to try to find out what happened, so it could jump into the millions very, very easily. So at the end of the day, like I said before, an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of the cure, which is my next slide. So that's pretty much PCI, what it's all about, why it's important. So now we'll jump into the audit. So the objective of the audit was to determine the city's compliance with our PCI policies and procedures. The scope was based on the PCI requirements as they were defined by the QSA. The QSA really helped us a lot as far as getting an understanding of what's required, what's not, and so it was helpful to be able to use them to help narrow down the scope. The frequency, we're gonna try to do these assessments quarterly, and the goal of this is because the external QSA is going to come once a year, you say December-ish, to do their formal assessment. So our goal is to help the city better prepare for that assessment by trying to mimic what that QSA does. So the goal is to do a complete review of all the city sites and locations as they're maintained by the Treasury's office before the QSA comes out in December. So we're going to do this again next quarter. The audit process, the first and foremost is we shadowed the QSA during the 2019 audit. So I was with her pretty much all along the way, asking questions, learning what is she doing, why is she doing it, which was an invaluable experience personally. Second one, obtain payment card listings, where are all the devices, what are all the applicable systems by the things kept by the city treasurer's office. Third, we consulted with the QSA and PCI team members. Internal audit is part of the city PCI team, and so we're constantly in communication with each other just to stay on top of things. Next is review the policies and procedures, obviously. Fourth, we interviewed staff, not only to get an understanding, but also to test their understanding of the process. And lastly, we performed system assessments and site visits virtually. Obviously, just go to the next slide, maybe, Jesse, please. So obviously, because of COVID, we couldn't do things normally. We were actually even wondering, is it possible to do this? But we figured out a way using iPads and WebEx to conduct our audit virtually. And then some screenshots I got, so like we have to verify, like, so the picture is a credit card. And so if you see the first arrow on the left, it's to check that the tamper seals are there and they're intact, they're not ripped. So usually we do that in person, obviously, but since we couldn't do that, we did it virtually, and we could just quickly grab screenshots and then import that into our work paper. So it was actually a very, very flawless experience. I mean, we were very pleasantly surprised. And the next one is like verifying security, the serial numbers to the Treasury office listings. And then the last one is it's just a random picture of a shredder, just to make sure, do all these departments have shredders that they could dispose of credit card information once they, if they do write it down. So that was just a couple of random screenshots to give you an idea of how we went virtual. So that was pretty much the PCI review. We had a total of four findings, and the first one was one department wrote down the full 16-digit personal account number, which is not allowed, and then they filed that away. So that was our first finding, that that they were not allowed to do that. The second one had to do with a third-party merchant that processes credit cards on our behalf. Given that they process credit cards on our behalf, the responsibility for PCI compliance falls on them. The way we get comfort that they are doing everything that they need to do is they provide us, it's called the AOC, an attestation of compliance. And that is basically a report from them, like similar to our bill of health report that we get from the QSA. That's a report they give to us showing, hey, look, we are also in compliance. So the report they gave us was using an outdated form instead of the up-to-date form. So that was number two. Number three was there was a system in-house that had two active user accounts that belonged to inactive users. So again, if you go to the 12 requirements, this is like access controls only, allowing people who need access having that access. That was number three. Number four was another one of those 12 requirements is having your system patches and antivirus software up to date. And one of the softwares, we couldn't quite tell if there was a system patch out there that was available that we should be pushing out to the system. Those were the four findings. The first one was addressed. They went through all of the files and they purged and shredded all the personal account numbers. The second one is we obtained the up-to-date AOC using the correct version. Number 3 is ISD jumped on it right away and removed those 2 inactive users. And number 4 is they developed a policy and procedure to actively go out and check for system patches every month so that they will be applied timely. So all 4 findings were addressed and rectified as they should be, because this is not you can't have findings lingering out. PCIs, you have to correct them right away because you're not allowed to be out of compliance. So everything, thankfully, was done very timely, and everything went smoothly. With that, I'm here to answer any questions, and also Assistant City Treasurer Gia Murray is also available on the call. If I can, I think she could chime in as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salim. Questions? Mr. O'Shaughnessy, I know you had one.
Actually, my question was answered during the balance of the report. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I've got some questions. So, finding number 1, full cardholder data was retained by staff. Are you talking about the actual credit card number plus the CVV plus all of the card data?
Right. So the way it worked is so that they took a payment over the phone, and to be able to take that payment, they had to write down everything and then take it to a different location to process it. So that's why they had to gather all that information, which is, it would have been okay if then they went straight ahead and shredded it right after you're done. But they stored all that information and filed it away, unfortunately.
Do we know how many records that they stored?
I don't have an exact count, but I would guess, and this is just a guess, maybe 100. I could get the exact number if you want, but that would be my my best guess if I could recall correctly.
And where were they stored? Where physically were they stored after they were collected?
They were stored in a secured file cabinet, so that's at least a good thing. And then the area was also a secured area. It wasn't like a public area where just anybody could get in there.
Okay. Were there any reports of credit card fraud associated with any of those, in any of that information? Not that I know, and nothing that was brought to the attention of the particular department either. Yeah, it's kind of hard to, because you have to. Yeah, it's kind of hard to say if it's for certain. Nothing that we know for certain. If something happened, because I've been a victim of credit card fraud many times, but it's kind of hard to tell what was the source of that. I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Salim.
Yeah. So nothing that we're certain of, no.
Okay. Finding number 3, the 2 active accounts. Were those current employees or former employees?
So for these, and Lizette, if you know exactly who these were, I don't think she does, but all that I know is that when I pinged the department, they said these accounts can be deactivated. I'm not sure. I have a feeling one of them was a system account, like a generic account that's set up when the system was set up. But I could look into that and get back to you if you wish.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested. Is there remote access by those accounts?
Oh, that one, Lizette, are you familiar if people can access this particular software outside, or is it only accessible once you're within the city network? I think it's a RecTrack.
Hi, Salim, just to verify, these were RecTrack accounts?
Yeah.
So that RecTruck portal is something that is accessible outside the city network.
It is accessible outside the city network. Are there any records of those two accounts remotely accessing the system after they were not supposed to have access?
I did look into that question, and from what I looked at, the issue with this particular one is that we had a system update that took place that kind of purged a lot of the records. So some of that data is lost, but I didn't see that. But again, I don't want to. Let me look into it for sure. I know what you're asking and what you're looking for. I will look into that, and I'll get back to you. I know what you're asking. Thank you, Mr.
Salim. Yeah, and as far as the automatic lockout, the importance of that automatic lockout, when that automatic lockout is not enabled, it allows, with fairly simple and available tools, people to just brute force, access the accounts. And so I'm curious if there's any log of, who accessed or attempted to access at what point. I think it's important, given the fact that we, the department processing those credit cards and responsible for these accounts had these issues. It's important that they follow up, not just remediate the issue, but also follow up to make sure that there were no intrusions or wrongdoing associated with that. I think there's a responsibility to do that.
Yeah, just to back up a little, just to bring you up a little bit more context. So this is just a username and password to access the general the general system. It doesn't necessarily mean they could get into the credit card related portion of the system. And there is access logs. It's just that when there was a update that was done, some of that was lost. But I totally agree, and I know. I think I have the answer. I just don't want to say it without verifying it first.
And that's fine. Just there's no hurry for that. Just get it to us at some point, Mr. Salim, please.
I will.
And this particular finding is something that seems to come up in a lot of our audits. And correct me if I'm wrong. This idea of active accounts being active after the fact, and it's I understand how it happens. I really do. But it's a process issue. Let's solve the issue. And I think it's a process issue at a fairly high level, that part of any exit is, there should be a checklist of what needs to happen. And this particular finding, making sure that any specialized access or logins are invalidated, I think that's really important that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
And I just want to add to that, that's the reason that we had this continuous auditing project that is periodically test the user access controls. So that's, just add to that.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments on this? Okay, thank you, Mr. Salim.
Yep, thank you.
Let's move on to our third project. That would be the COVID-19 Employee Customer Visitor Health Safety Risk Survey.
All right. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Terrific. Good afternoon, Chair, Mary, and Audit Committee members. My name is Natalie Hinami Valvidia, and I'm a Senior Internal Auditor within the Internal Audit Division. Today, I will be presenting to you the COVID-19 Employee Customer Visitor Health and Safety Express Risk Survey last quarter. Next slide, please. The purpose of the survey conducted were to perform a timely periodic risk assessment to respond and raise awareness related to the emerging risks, and assist the city and its departments to identify, assess, and address its COVID-19 related risks. To accomplish our objective, we worked with our Information Services Department to design a 10-question online risk assessment survey. We created an automated template so that we could report the results in real time. And lastly, it's important to note that the results were based upon the survey responses received and were not verified by internal audit. Next slide, please. Some of the risk factors addressed in our survey included individuals with underlying medical conditions, individuals over the age of 65, those traveling to areas with high incidence rate, exposure to individuals that have tested positive for the virus, and then the potential for high absenteeism. Next slide, please. So why the survey? The survey was created to facilitate timely risk assessments of the COVID-19 related emerging risks, to provide real-time results and raise awareness through the use of the automated survey and report template, and provide management with mitigation tools to reduce the risks identified. Next slide, please. The survey process included conducting best practice research, designing the survey and analysis template, and conducting the survey. Upon notification that a survey had been submitted, the information was downloaded into the pre-established Excel survey template sheet to create customized reports for each department without visualization. Next slide, please. The deliverables from this audit included a customized department summary report and a complete list of the surveyed risks and recommended mitigating factors. Once all of the department surveys were received, we provided city management with a summary of risk results by department and risk factors. So here's a breakdown of the deliverables we provided. Next slide, please. The departmental report was generated based on the Excel survey and report template. The template provided a drop-down menu that allowed the auditor to select survey number populated based on the available express risk survey data. Once the survey number was selected, the department summary was automatically populated with the appropriate survey provided responses. Next slide, please. We then attached the complete list of the risks and mitigating factors to the department summary to be used as an educational tool to reduce the risks identified. Next slide, please. Once the department responses were received, internal audit compiled a summary report to city management. The report included the overall average risk score by city department. Next slide, please. The citywide risk score provided is equal to the sum of individual department risk scores, and the color indicates the related risk level. Based on the citywide risk assessment by question, the risk levels were categorized based on this legend. For the 10 questions asked, there were 6 categorized as low risk, 3 as medium risk, and 1 as high risk. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps? The tools provided can assist departments and city management to reduce the high-risk areas identified by implementing the corresponding mitigating factors. And these steps will help to ensure that we keep our employees, customers, and visitors healthy and safe. Next slide. This completes my presentation. I'd like to recognize and thank each department and ISD Dave Whiting for their assistance throughout the COVID-19 employee, customer, and visitor health risk survey process. Assistant City Manager Rupert Balanian and I are here to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Questions? Okay. I have a couple questions. So, there was one citywide total risk score that was in the high area, and that was, does your department have employees, customers, and visitors access your workplace business by public transportation or rideshare? So can you briefly explain how that got categorized as a high risk based upon the answers and the mitigating factors?
Okay, so the way that these scores were tallied, basically each of the, if you answered yes, no, or unsure, you're assigned a score. So if your score was yes, your score was considered to be a 3. So the mitigating factors, the second question, or the second portion of the survey question was to ask if you have any of the mitigating controls in place. So if you had any of those mitigating controls in place, it deducted, I believe it was 2 points in order to bring it down to a low risk score. So in this case, departments identified that they have this risk, but they didn't necessarily have the mitigating control in place. So when we tallied all those, when we accumulated all those scores, the average was still high enough that the complete total was high enough to put them into that high risk category. So basically, going forward, those departments that didn't have any mitigating controls in place, mitigating control, I believe that that one was to ask our employees and our customers to try and take public transportation during non-peak times, or just adjust that they utilize their own personal vehicle to access to these facilities.
Okay. How is, how did, city management and the department heads kind of receive this audit, and were there, I imagine there are several of these that go into the current audit that's ongoing regarding the gap analysis that we're looking at with the city's response to COVID-19. But how did city management receive this and the department heads receive this?
So during our risk assessment meeting, I did ask a few of the departments, and they think this is a pretty good list, and then to help them at least, raise the awareness, so that they don't miss anything. There's, one of them actually mentioned, oh no, I didn't think about this, so then this helped me, remind me something I should do. So that's actually, one of the main purposes behind us doing this type of audit. It's, like Natalie indicated earlier, one is for us to, very timely assess any emerging risks that is, new to us. And then also, we want to use this as an educational tool. So that's why one department right after they submit the survey, they receive the result right away, along with a complete set of risk and control listing. So then, based on their own results, they can have that tool to check, okay, so I have this area with higher risk, let me go find out what I should do. So that's actually the kind of equally important reason behind us doing this. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to 6B, please. Oh, wait, did I jump the gun?
So, yeah,
I did.
If you...
No, I jumped the gun. We still have some projects in progress, area number 2. So our reports are done, completed projects are done.
Right.
Let's go to projects in process.
Okay, I can, do it quickly. So as I said, there are total 7 sections in this report. The next one is project in progress. So there are 3 listed under this section: false alarm contract audit, sewer fee billing system audit, and the one that requested by this committee, the pandemic response plan gap analysis. So all 3 projects are currently in process, and I believe we will complete all of them this quarter. So you will, receive a report on all of them. And the next session is continuous auditing. So the first one listed is the user access control, any application. Earlier I mentioned we do periodic testing on the Active Directory. And this one is another script we wrote to be used by auditors in any audit they do that, any system we run into will run this script to test the user access control. So that's what Samuel did for the red track. And another one we use this script on is the North Star system that Ani used when she did her sewer billing audit. The second project we completed is we wrote another very exciting and useful script. It's called Data Integrity Validation Procedure. So this is to validate any data files received by internal audit prior to performing any data analytics or any detailed test work. So this is actually a pretty comprehensive script, includes 6 nested scripts, testing dates, testing characters, numerical fields, dates, and numerical data fields relations. So validating data is a required step for auditors prior to performing our test work. So this tool or this script provides an additional benefit to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of this requirement. So I'm very happy to have this script done, and then we've already started using it in our audit. The next session, actually the next 3 sessions are all related to audit follow-up. So we have completed our quarterly follow-up process for outstanding audit issues by communicating with department representatives on the implementation status. So for this past quarter, we have followed up with departments on 46 outstanding items from a total of 13 completed audit projects. So of which 13 were implemented. Unfortunately, 9 were not implemented, and 7 of them are all from one audit, which left us with 24 outstanding items at the end of the quarter. So section number 5 is a list of all the priority 1 audit issues. Most of them are from the Modern Parking Inc. contract compliance audit that we recently completed. And section number 6 is based on the passing of our Audit Committee resolution number 2. The department directors are requested to discuss the status of any outstanding audit issues when any of the 3 events occur, which is if an audit item is not implemented or any issues that have not been implemented 2 years or 3 years from the report issuance. So we have a total of 9 items listed here. As I mentioned, 7 of them are all from one audit, which is the records management audit. And the other 2 are actually in process. So the reason we list them here as not implemented is because they're reaching 3 years. It's been 3 years. So then we will not follow up any longer, but those 2 are still in progress.
Okay, let's actually dive into a couple of these. I mean, let's start with item number 5. So, I mean, it seems like is there an issue with modern parking that these are not being implemented? There are several outstanding priority 1 audit issues.
Oh, hi. We have representative from Public Works Department. I guess they're ready to answer.
Oh, wonderful.
Question.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. This is Tad Nabrocki, the city's parking manager. Due to COVID-19, we actually raised the gates at the garages and are having them as free parking right now. Primarily, the items that are all related to modern parking have to do with reporting, and we can't make any progress on that until we're actually back in normal operation. So, as it continues now, we put a hopeful date of September 30th, but even now we're already into this quarter and still don't have the garages return to normal operating conditions.
Now, so the expectation is that until those issues are resolved, you will keep the gates up?
No, the gates going up is strictly based on COVID. There was no demand, there were no people out, and it was a policy decision that we would raise the gates and save some of the payroll costs through the contract. However, without the staff there and without the daily reports and the customers, we can't move forward on implementing a lot of these changes.
Okay. Has there been a look at how significantly these parking lots have been impacted by COVID-19? Or is it just basically kind of an idea based upon what businesses are reporting and what you see?
At the time the decision was made to raise the gates and not staff the way that we had been prior, it was due to the instant volume drop when the stay-at-home orders were in place. So it was right around the end of March that the decision was made to just raise the gates until further notice.
What's happening with monthly, people who pay a monthly fee for parking? Are they still paying that monthly fee?
They are not.
Okay.
And that goes to my point. Some of the audit controls that we're trying to implement have to do with those monthly fees and the accounting for them, which we can't do until we get back to normal operation.
That makes sense. Okay. Any other questions on number 5 here?
One question.
Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
When you discuss the script and the fact that this new script allows you to, in a sense, quality control before you complete the audit, does the material that the script is analyzing, is it in a separate computer so it doesn't contaminate the general finance files, or how is it protected before the script runs its course?
We run the script against the set of data that we received or downloaded. It's not run against the system directly.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chair Miriam, this is Ed Kashadurian. I just want to make a comment.
Yes, Mr. Kashadurian.
Given the explanation that we just heard, I would recommend that under the current status, we do not mention September 30th. Maybe put a statement to the fact that due to COVID-19, these activities will have to be postponed under further notice. I think that makes, based on the explanation that we just heard, I think that makes better sense.
That's a very good point. I believe we have a footnote in our actual audit report. Maybe we should just use that footnote here next time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any I'm not sure what the footnote says now. I can't recall off the top of my head. But you know, I mean, I'm okay with. I agree with you, but I also think there should be a date. Otherwise, you know, things have a tendency to kind of fall by the wayside. We can always revisit, and we are a very understanding audit committee. So, you know, I mean, it's not something that we're going to necessarily hold against them if we are operating under the understanding that it's directly related to COVID-19. So, I mean, I'm fine with the footnote being added to that.
Yeah, I will add the footnote in addition to the date.
Yeah, but I think it should still come to us in this report in this manner so that we're clear on it.
So the priority 1 issues will always stay until they're resolved.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kashidarian.
So the footnote we had in the report is the date may be extended due to unforeseen circumstances presented by the global COVID-19 pandemic.
Sounds good. Let's move to the outstanding audit issues meeting, the number 6 here. Audit issues that have not been implemented within 3 years of the report date. So I see what the current status is on the Faster Fleet Asset Management System audit, but as I recall, this was a quite an illuminating audit for both the committee and the city. You know, what's going on with not being able to get this this resolved?
So for this particular issue, the recommendation, the control we're looking for is to increase the accuracy and reduce duplicate entry, because there are a number of data have to be entered to both systems. So then we're even in the initial recommendation, we say in the future to see if there's a possibility to you know, have some system integration to reduce the duplicate entry effort. So for this particular one, because we implemented Munis financial system in the system went live January 1, 2019. So they really have, you know, not whole 3 years to look into this this issue. So
just 1.5.
Yeah, but you know, the Munis has to be stabilized. Actually, there will be an upgrade coming soon. So I'm thinking this probably will be further delayed due to that system upgrade. And then we're also looking into other options instead of a direct interface between the two systems, maybe just have some data set downloaded from Munis and uploaded to Faster. So there are you know, the Public Works and Finance staff have been working together on this. I'm sure they can add more to it. Both department heads are here.
Yeah, I'm curious how confident you know, these departments are in terms of the controls that are in place with the financial accounting system, and you know, inventory or invoices. Can we get somebody to respond on that, please?
Sure, Mr. Chair Marion, this is Michelle Flynn, members of the committee. With regards to the financial system and the controls over it, we don't have any issues with that. Our auditors last year did not identify anything that was any concern whatsoever with regards to the recording or accuracy of the data and how the system is operating. It does have controls within it. The processes also have controls within it. We have workflow that help with system controls. So we're in good shape when it comes to that. With regards to this one issue, as Ms. Zhang mentioned, we didn't have the system in place until last January. And yes, it's been a year and a half. However, those first 6, 8, 9 months are spent trying to stabilize that system, playing catch up. We also had lots going on with trying to deal with 2 systems during a year-end close. So a lot of the support from the financial applications team within finance was dedicated towards stabilizing the system, managing the workflow, retweaking workflows for departments, as well as supporting the rest of finance in getting budget done, as well as the city's CAFR. So that was a good portion of last year. And as we've gone through that year and started to stabilize more and move forward and get caught up with our work, the financial applications team has been working more recently with Public Works in trying to resolve this issue and figure out how best to move forward to get them what they need. So we are still actively working on it with them.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions about that faster fleet asset management section? Okay, records management audit, the findings number 1 through 7. Again, I see the current status here. I'm curious as to, how record management is going to be handled.
Chair Amirian and committee members, this is Arama Jamin, the city clerk. We have been working day and night, especially with this COVID-19, with a limited amount of staff. Currently, I have about 4 people, full-time employees. Since I have 4 full-time employees, I had 6 in October. I also had 2 hourly employees, which I cannot use at this point. So I know it shows that we have been working on this for 3 years, but technically, based on the lack of staffing for the last several years, we started, but we weren't able to finish it.
Got it. So what's, I mean, it's just, I'm trying, Mr. Ajami, I'm trying to kind of read between the lines here. Is this something that you plan on addressing after, the COVID-19 situation has stabilized, or is this something that you would require more staffing for?
Absolutely, both. As soon as COVID-19 goes away, I bring in some hourly employees, some GYA employees, and we have a full staff of 6. As a newly elected and appointed city clerk, we'll definitely get back on this ball and get it rolling and have it done.
Yeah, and I mean, I know we have a council member who served in that position. I don't want to say Mr. Kasakian left you holding a bag here, but I'm sure he is aware and sympathetic to what's going on here. And I know that you and I imagine Mr. Kasakian and as well as management understand how important records management is to being able to run an efficient and effective operation at every level, as well as meeting the government's fiduciary responsibilities and mandated responsibilities to have information transparent and available for the public.
You are absolutely correct, and one of my goals is to complete this. I can't tell you when. As soon as, like I said, I have a full staff of 6 or 7 full-time employees and some hourly employees, we will jump on the ball again and start it. I know where we are with it currently, and I can move along with it. Councilmember Kasakian was great in starting the process, and we worked very closely together. And he has given us the tools to make sure that we continue on this process, and we will get to that point when we have enough staffing.
Okay, and Mr. Golian, since we have you here, are there any plans to, I know this question is maybe one that should not be uttered out loud, but are there any plans to increase staffing for the city clerk's office in light of some of these issues?
Chair and Marion, members of the Audit Committee, as it stands, due to the uncertainty in the financial and collection of revenues that Ms. Flynn and Ms. Karamian talked about earlier, we have put a hiring freeze in place currently until such time that our revenues will track as expected. And we are looking at some strategies currently, but as for the near future, there are no plans to increase staffing, not just at City Clerk's office, but any of the departments within the city. However, I will have a conversation with Mr. Jemian to see if there are any other ways of perhaps hiring an outside vendor to help out with the process, or any other means that we can help push this process through.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I appreciate that. I am sure that there have been discussions about, the risks and liabilities associated with this specific issue, especially, as it pertains to, the public's interest in having records maintained properly. We wouldn't want the city to be exposed to, some sort of penalty or even litigation as a result of, just not having, a dedicated person or a couple of dedicated persons working on this issue. So I'm sure those conversations have taken place. I would just really encourage management to work with Mr. Ajemian and also maybe speak to the city attorney about identifying what the liabilities are here and evaluate whether or not it's a good idea to make an exception, as it were, to that hiring freeze.
Miriam, we will definitely have that conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Golian. Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
Given the fact that the decrease in staff at the city clerk's office happened because of a positive act of democracy at the election, shouldn't that position possibly be exempt from the freeze?
I'm sorry. I didn't understand that. Could you just rephrase or repeat that?
When Artie was still the city clerk, they had X number of staff. He got elected to the city council, and we had a promotion from inside the department for the new city clerk appointed. Since that change of staff was because of the positive actions within the election, shouldn't it be exempted from the freeze?
I understand. Okay. Mr. Golian?
Yeah, Chair Amirian, members of the committee. It's not as straightforward as it seems. When Mr. Ajemian was appointed to the position that was vacated by now Councilmember Kasakian, as you know, this is for a 2-year period or so, I believe. And the arrangement was that Mr. Ajemian had committed not to run for the position. And if that is the case, then he will have to revert back to his old position. So if we have a person in that position, then it's going to make things complicated, to say the least. But we will work with the city clerk's office. Like I mentioned, there are other resources that we can tap into, being at hourly positions on a temporary basis, or an outside vendor who can help us with this process. But we fully understand.
Thank you for that clarification.
We fully understand the importance of this item.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding outstanding audit issues that have not been implemented within 3 years of the report date? Mr. Ajemian, thank you so much for being here and addressing those issues.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Amirian and committee members.
Let's move on to the section number 7 here, advisory services.
So just very quickly, let's see. So internal audit team members have participated in 3 teams. One is the Investment Policy Advisory Committee. One is the Energy Risk Management Committee. We have been on those 2 for a long time. And then now we have a new one, which Samuel mentioned earlier, is the city's Pci Compliance team. So that is the report.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's move on to 6B.
6B is fiscal year 2019-20 audit work plan review and proposed fiscal year 2020-21 audit work plan. Jesse Zhang, Internal Audit Manager.
So Mr. Chair and Audit Committee members, I'm happy to provide you a report on the Internal Audit Annual Work Plan. I prepared a hopefully short PowerPoint presentation to walk you through the report. So the purpose of the report, there are 3 main purposes of the report. First is to provide an update on the internal audit activities for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020. The second purpose is to provide a reconciliation of fiscal year 2019-20 work plan. And the third purpose is to highlight the process used to develop the proposed fiscal year 2021 audit work plan. So similar to last year, this report included an executive summary along with 4 exhibits. So Exhibit 1 is the last year's work plan status update. Exhibit 2 is the proposed work plan for this year. Exhibit 3 is the risk assessment questionnaire we used during our risk assessment meetings. And Exhibit 4 is a list of potential audit subjects. So in today's presentation, I would like to focus on answering 4 questions. What is a work plan? How is it developed? How did internal audit do in last year? And what is planned for this year? So this is just a quick refresher. I think we did a lot of this last year. What is the work plan? A work plan is a to-do list, and this to-do list is a dynamic one. I would, I will emphasize this a lot in this presentation because it's very important, especially during this pandemic time. So, so the dynamic to-do list, meaning it can be adjusted based on the risks and the priorities. And also a work plan is, I didn't show this. The work plan is required by the Glendale Municipal Code. And the GMC requires that the plan be prepared based on assessment of relative risk. So it's very similar to how we maintain our own to-do list. It's a live document, and it's developed, our work plan is developed through a risk-based audit plan development model. So I would like to use this one diagram to explain the work plan development model or the process. So it shows the work plan development life cycle. I summarized it into 5 steps, but it's really a year-long ongoing process. Again, the work plan is dynamic and flexible. And it's a living document. So the risk and the project identified can continuously updated with new information learned, and both on any emerging risks or changes in the existing risks. So the risk assessment process starts when we file the work plan with the City Council. It is really an ongoing process. Throughout the year, we continue to receive information on new risk or requests from city manager, department heads, audit committee, and employees. Internal audit staff also add audit topics when conduct our audits. So depending on the risk level, these requests are either added to the audit universe to be discussed at the annual risk assessment meeting or to be performed right away. An example of this is the pandemic response plan gap analysis that requested by the audit committee, which was added to the current year plan, which is last year's plan, and started by internal audit right away. We also conduct periodic risk assessment survey focusing on hot topics and the emerging risks. So the key benefits of these express risk survey include to facilitate timely risk assessment on emerging risks to see if any adjustment to the work plan is needed. It's also to raise awareness of the emerging risks, as I mentioned earlier, and to provide management with mitigation tools to reduce the identified risks. It is an educational tool because along with risk assessment results, a set of controls are also provided to the management. So the example is what Natalie presented earlier, the COVID-19 employee customer visitor health and safety express risk survey. Once a year, a more comprehensive risk assessment with each department is conducted to assess higher risk areas and to develop the audit work plan for the coming year. Along with step 5, the annual process also involves city manager, audit committee, city council. So in the next slide, I will provide a little more, zoom in a little more on these 2 annual steps. So this slide will provide additional detail on the specific steps we performed during the comprehensive annual risk assessment process. So first, we use available data to calculate risk scores, and we hold risk assessment meetings with directors, managers from each department, and to help us have a better understanding of the control environment in that department, the business and operational changes, and any concerns and challenges they may have. And then we review and update our audit universe, which is a list of audit projects. So these discussions are guided using a risk assessment questionnaire, which has been tailored to be more relevant to the current pandemic situation, focusing on risks related to business impact by COVID-19, disaster response and recovery, third-party service provider risks, etc. Once we have met with each department, we compile the project with risk ranking, and then we review the top ranked project with the city managers and make a final selection to the proposed work plan. And now today, we review this work plan with you, the audit committee, before we submit it to City Council. Ooh.
You know what, let's ask Mr. Parhon to actually state whatever question he has. Mr. Parhon?
Will approve or deny?
Chair, I don't have any questions at the moment.
Oh, okay. We just had something pop up. Okay. Go on, please.
Oh, here. So internal audit always, working on to do things better and making continuous improvement. So this year, I would like to highlight two changes we made. One is due to COVID-19, in order to comply with the social distancing requirements, all risk assessment meetings were conducted virtually with video conference and online document sharing, etc. We use WebEx or MS Teams. And the second change we made is we have adopted a more data-driven approach by perform data analytics on available data to calculate the risk scores and bring that information to the meeting. And another set of data we shared with the department is the vendor information. Each department received a complete list of their vendors with contracts and purchase orders, how much is the contract or purchase order amount, and how much they've already spent in that contract. So, so far we covered what a work plan is and how it was developed. So now let's take a look at how we did in fiscal year 2020. So we made some revisions to the plan. 9 projects were added, 2 put on hold, like you heard about it at our last quarterly meeting. So here. And the 1 redirected due to the changes in the risks. And this will bring us from the originally planned 18 projects to total 27 projects. And this is a reconciliation of the plan. Of the 3 carryover projects, we complete all 3. All 5 continuous and advisory projects are also completed. Of the 10 new projects we added last year, 4 were completed and 4 are currently in progress. So total 12 completed, 4 in process. And with the, of the 9 projects we added, 8 of them were completed, and 1 is currently in progress, and that's the pandemic gap analysis audit. So in total, of the 27 projects, 20 of them were completed, 5 in progress, and we have 2 were not performed yet. 1 will not, and 1 actually reselected to the current year's plan, this year's plan. So, so finally, here's our proposed fiscal year 21 work plan. It's in exhibit, the detail, you can find the detail in exhibit number 2. So just a quick summary, total 21 projects in this year's plan. 5 were carryover projects, 10 were new projects selected, and 6 are the continuous and ongoing advisory projects. In addition to these, working on these projects, we have some routine activities such as risk assessment, quarterly follow-up, quality control system, audit committee meetings, and audit committee support, including the newly added responsibility of committee secretary. So that's the end, and I hope after hearing this presentation, how the plan was developed, you feel comfortable and confident that we're heading to the right direction, and we will be focusing our effort and resources on the high-risk area and to where it's most needed. Also, we are in an ever-changing environment. The work plan is flexible and dynamic and can be amended throughout the year to reflect the changes in city's risks and priorities. I would like to conclude my presentation by thanking everyone involved in this process, including the entire executive management team, the assistant city manager, and the committee members for providing your valuable input throughout the year. So with that, if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Let's open this up to questions.
Chair Miriam, this is Kashiduri, and I have a
Yes, Mr. Kashiduri.
I have a question or sort of like a comment. First of all, thank you so much to everyone involved in this work in the process. I know how time-consuming and sometimes difficult these things are, but in looking at the proposed plan for the 2021 fiscal year, and I believe that we brought this up once before, but I don't see potential hour allocations for each of these 21 projects. In looking at the past performance for the 2020 fiscal year, I noticed that there are some projects that really consume a lot of hours, almost 900 hours, 700 hours. I wanted to propose that if that would be possible going forward, maybe starting from next year, the committee should maybe have, need to be provided some sort of explanation as far as the justification for the hours, and in the sense that if then the committee thinks that these hours could be spent elsewhere. I mean, I know that we have to look at the highest priorities, but then again, do you think if a project consumes 1,000 hours, can we just maybe allocate some of that to other projects? And if they're not such a high-risk project, then basically look at allocating the hours to other more higher priority projects, things of that nature, because the only thing that really at this point we have is just the risk assessment or the risk ranking of these proposed projects, but we don't really know how much resource allocation they will entail. I don't know if I make sense here, but I'm trying to say, well, we need to have you look at the risk in comparison to the cost, and an efficient allocation usually is done by comparing the two.
May I start? Answer that?
Mr. O'Shaughnessy, are you still there? Just checking, because I noticed you may have dropped off.
I am back now. I went in on the call-in phone and IT unblocked the mission, so I was only off for about 14 minutes.
Okay. And you just got back on?
About 3 minutes ago.
Okay. Well,
I've been listening on TV. So
perfect.
I heard the report.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mr. O'Shaughnessy. Okay, go ahead. Excuse me.
So thank you for that question. And I remember you asked for the hours to be added back. My understanding was for the actual hours spent. In terms of budgeted hours, it's really to my team. I basically have a goal. It's a stretch goal to complete each project. It still depends on what type of project. It's between 450 to 500 hours. So the one I'm looking at last year's list, the one that with the highest number of hours is the multi-project of affordable housing lottery audit. That is actually the audit that Mr. Chair, you visited us, and we had a much detailed walkthrough to show you what does it take to analyze those data. So I don't know if you have something to add to that. So it's really
I do actually. I mean that audit specifically. It seemed like it. I mean, you call it a real-time audit, but really it was like you were doing real-time work. For to actually get that lottery done in such a way that was fair to everybody that applied. So I mean, I completely understand that, and that's something I am confident that city management and the council understand. When we see audits that use up that many hours, that the city is fully leveraging the internal audit function in some cases to address real-time concerns that positively affect the residents of the city of Glendale. I would have it no other way. As long as we can maintain internal audits, objectivity, and lack of any conflicts, which in that case, was not an issue at all.
And again, as we do audit of other departments. We always recommend other departments how to be more efficient. We do that to ourselves as well. So we always trying to be more productive and efficient. And then we also, try to work smarter, not just harder. I think my team already worked pretty hard. Not sure if any harder, but there always a room to stretch. But so we try to, to try out these variety of agile auditing approach, continuous auditing, express checklist audit, and the express risk survey. All of these are important and add value to the city. And at the same time, we try to do it as efficient as we can. We try to utilize the technology that is available to us. So if you look at the continuous auditing section, the testing, it's all under 200 hours. That's 2 of them, I think. Okay, it's 1 of them. So it's like in the past, we never had audit. I mean, never say ever, but most of audit will not be completed within a couple hundred hours. So that's what we, work hard towards. I don't like to see, high numbers of hours spent on one project. But, for that particular one, we're basically chasing a moving target. So the data keep changing, and we actually utilized the Abutus software to run some script. Otherwise, it will still be even higher. So we will continue to work on to be more efficient, to be more productive, and that's just that's all I'm going to say.
Does that address your question, Mr. Kashtarin?
Yes, it does. And my point was not specifically to point out a specific project or to talk in specific terms regarding, this is like, we are going above and over. My point was more a procedural sort of reminder, hopefully, that when you're looking at, let's say, a risk element, the risk element is always translated into cost, and you have to compare that cost to other types of costs. This whole conversation came up, if you remember, a while back when we were looking at, if I'm not wrong, there was this grant application that a few nonprofit organizations were submitting their proposals, and we were spending time creating, I think, a template or something, or calculating the financial ratio, something that they had to do. And it really crossed my mind at the time. Again, this is not really specific to the 2019, 2020. But to me, the point is that you have to always have something to compare your risks against. And this actual hours and the planned hours, I think, would be at least, very, very helpful to look at it before the implementation of the project. And so that was my general comment. The idea that I had was that if, let's say for next year or the years in the future, we know that there's going to be a project that will probably, the planned hours is going to be more than 500, maybe we can have some sort of justification that this is really important, because what you're going to get out of it is going to be very, very significant for the city or something like that. So it's just a matter of like how we allocate the time. It's not to question whether or not these numbers are too high or too low. So I want to kind of clarify myself, and that point that I'm trying to make is more systematic approach rather than specific to any project.
Thank you, Mr. Kashtarin.
Thank you.
Any other committee members? I have a couple of questions. The audit universe, Exhibit 4, when did the process begin of identifying this putting together this document?
So this list was developed many years ago. And as I mentioned, remember that the model, when I say the risk assessment process starts when we file the work plan with the City Council. So that's when we start to update the new list for next year. And we actually, it's in the Excel spreadsheet, and then the first tab is called Starting Point. So I literally, after this document is, filed with City Council, I will save as to the next year. So then the starting point will gather projects that's requested by, can be from anywhere, city manager's office, employees, and then management, and the internal audit. So we have a, it's our ongoing practice. When we do an audit, we have our objective and scope, but sometimes we noted things that may not be in the scope of that audit, but we think it may need to be looked further. And that's one example. We'll add that project to the list. So we gather this, and then at the end of once a year, we'll bring the list with the additional project to each department and review them together. And as I mentioned also, it depends on the level of the risk. Just for example, the one you brought up last meeting. So the pandemic one, and we added and started right away. But there are other audits, like the payroll codes audit. It was added by internal audit when we're working on continuous auditing testing ideas. So then we brought it up to the department and to the city manager, and that was selected for the coming year.
Okay. It does. It does. I mean, looking through the audit universe, the reason why I asked in terms of when it was created, there's some very real issues that are going on right now. As you mentioned, the committee, recommended looking into a gap analysis of the city's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. What we're seeing across the country right now in terms of some of the let's say criminal activities, in terms of rioting and looting, things that our city actually had to deal with as well. And we were proactive in the manner in which we dealt with it. But a lot of this is in response to very specific things, in terms of police interaction with the community. And I'm a big proponent of Glendale Police Department, and I always have been. And I, know many of the officers. But something that's missing here is, in my mind, a look at training procedures, and how Glendale Police might mitigate some of the potential issues that arise just by the reality of what their police work entails, and the limitations of the training that they're able to give to the officers. Personally speaking, I'm somebody who has been, grappling for 4 years, and I understand the difficulty of dealing with somebody who's being nice in a physical aspect, and I can imagine what police officers have to deal with when they're dealing with a situation where they feel that they are in potential risk of great bodily harm or injury, and how that might be mitigated through a look at their training procedures and the processes that police are trained and undergo ongoing training. I've had a lot of conversations with law enforcement officers and officials regarding, the ratio of training to on-duty work. Our police should definitely not be militarized in any way, shape, or form, but there are some aspects of training and the processes through which that training occurs where, the ratio of time spent of training to actually being out on the streets is a lot higher in other areas. So one of the things that I look at this audit universe, and I know that we have a Glendale Police Department carryover in terms of false alarm contract administration. But in terms of liability to the city, in terms of potential impact to the city, given all of the situations that are occurring, it's interesting that there isn't some deeper dive looks into how Glendale Police's training stacks up, not only to other departments, but to what might be best practices or innovating moving forward. So that's something I would love to be considered, and I'd love to hear some of the thoughts of the other committee members on that.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
In response to what you just brought up, I think it would be interesting to find out, since we have the Briggs Sheriff Station just north of the city, and if there was ever a need to bring in extra support because of some problem, it would come out of Briggs before it came out of anywhere else. Secondarily, the LA City Northeast LA Station, which was just rebuilt, the new one, which is just down the street off of San Fernando Road. Yeah, I would be curious what kind of interagency interoperability is being done in the area of law enforcement, because I know we run Verdugo Dispatch for the fire out of Glendale, and fire is the other segment of public policy service besides paramedics. So it's an interesting question to see what kind of response or what kind of studies are being done. That's all.
Thank you. I'm thinking out loud as I see some of these issues, and I see some of the issues that are going on across the country, and I've trained police officers in strength and conditioning. I've trained with police officers in jiu-jitsu, and I have nothing but empathy for the difficulty in terms of the things they have to do with the amount of training that I know that they get on some of these, when I see things across the country about banning chokeholds, affecting police officers' ability to use non-lethal methods that require training, that require ongoing training. They're perishable skills. The question arises, why isn't the city of Glendale, which is a leader, in the United States in so many areas, especially when it comes to safety, taking the lead on some of these issues within the police department of making sure that the police have not just training that's equal to another police department, but looking at the process and determining whether or not there's a completely different way at looking at, how an officer's time is spent, while they are an officer in the city of Glendale. If it makes sense to have them be training for one full day out of their 4 days on, I believe they're on for 4 days and off for 3 days, and that's something that I think the city management can leverage audit, and I think it's a glaring, issue right now facing the city and facing the nation. And the last thing I want is for some outside group to come in and through the media or like putting pressure on city council members who are up for re-election to try to get things that actually help police officers mitigate non-lethal threats, proper training to try to eliminate that, this idea of defund the police and things like that. I think there's an opportunity here to look at some of those processes, and I'm curious what both city management thinks and what the leadership of the police department thinks as it comes to that. I understand there are a lot of complex variables with this, but that's something that was missing here in my mind, and it's something that we should consider looking at.
Just in response to, related to maintain the list or how to update the list that so the conversation can happen. I welcome, the committee members. If you have any ideas, then just send it to me so then we can add that to the list, to our starting point page. And then we can have a conversation with the management in our risk assessment process. If it's not an urgent matter like the pen, audit you requested that we have to do it right away, and then we will at least have a conversation on it, and then to see if there are, what are the controls already in place. Maybe they have some study done already, we don't know. So then at least we'll ask those questions. And yeah, just any ideas, and also the risk assessment, express risk, if you have any ideas, and let me know.
Yeah, well, I would like to see, a potential audit subject area of training practices and best practices, innovation opportunities, with management, internal audit, and the leadership of the police department working kind of hand in hand at looking at what options are proactively before a mob starts calling for police being defunded, or certain manners in which the police effectively do their work be eliminated. I think it's probably a better idea to look at it proactively rather than reactively, because as far as I know right now, New York has banned chokeholds. And listen, as somebody who has been grappling for 4 years, I get safely choked, multiple times a week. And I'm telling you right now, there's an effective way to do it. It's a controlled manner. And when we look at some of the videos that we're seeing across the country, of 2 police officers not being able to control a suspect that they have on the ground, and then that, through the person's own actions, of course, leading to their own to their death, I mean, that would have been avoidable had the police been able to control, that, and that's a training issue. It all has to do with training. And I stress that the police are my friends. I have no greater appreciation for what police and our first responders go through, and the things that they have to deal with, the dangers. I hear it from them firsthand, and I see it. But I think this is something that we have an opportunity for, and there might be some projects here that might be able to maybe be moved or put on hold. So I'd like that to be looked at, please.
Chair Miriam, if I can add, the city manager's office is aware and is looking at some of the issues that you are raising, and I believe very recently a report went to City Council, and it's captured under the umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I know looking at police training and some of the policies that you're referencing does fall under that. So I do know that the police chief and the city manager's office are aware and looking into some of these issues. But we do take your feedback in terms of adding this subject area to our audit universe.
Thank you. And you know what? Can you speaking of diversity, inclusion, and equity, can you get me exactly what what you're referencing in terms of how that's being fit under that particular umbrella? I mean, all three of those things, in and of themselves, as far as I'm concerned, are valuable. When those three are combined in that specific kind of package, I hear something else. I hear equality of outcome, which is a completely different discussion. So I'm interested in since you brought it up specifically, diversity, inclusion, equity, that umbrella, how that relates to proper training for the police officers, because I outright reject the idea that the training is somehow linked to racism or a lack of diversity or a lack of inclusion or equity. Training is training. It has nothing to do with those things as far as I'm concerned. So I'd like to see what you're actually referring, please.
I think it just had to do with the timing of the George Floyd incident and all of the discussions that took place, and city council members asking for different aspects. And so the report that went to city council, again, was this, it encapsulated everything, from workforce demographics to diversity of boards and commissions to looking at a lot of the different programs that the city of Glendale offers that fall under that umbrella. And so again, because of what was happening in the nation, the topic of police training did fall under that, or that was one of the reasons the council members and the timing of their request.
Okay. And that request came from council?
That is correct.
Okay. And if you could just forward me to, or forward that portion to me so that I can look at it, and maybe that addresses the issue. But if it doesn't, I'd like it to be considered. Having said that, with that caveat, I mean, is there an action we have to take on this, or is this just a report?
A report and information, so.
Okay. Any other comments or questions regarding this? Okay. Let's move on to, was there anything else with this, Ms. Shang? Okay, thank you so much for that report. Let's move on to number 7, Audit Committee or staff comments. I'll open it up to my fellow committee members.
O'Shaughnessy, nothing to add this afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Shaughnessy. Mr. Parhon, Mr. Kashadurian?
No comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to thank staff for the work that they've put into this. You know, again, we're in an unprecedented situation here, and you know, the job of the city, considering everything that's going on, and all the staff, it's, you know, I really appreciate everything that you do. All of my interactions, it feels like to me that there hasn't really been any type of dip in productivity. Instead, there's been an increase in productivity and efficiency, and I really appreciate that. I can't tell you how much, how proud I am, you know, as a resident of Glendale, of the work that staff does in order to, you know, keep everything going. You know, as an audit committee member, you know, we have a responsibility to make sure that we address potential risks and liabilities to the city, and you know, and all of my comments and questions come from that place. So, you know, I do get passionate about this stuff because I care. I mean, I've been a commissioner in this city for 15 years, and you know, it's the thing that I've done the most in my life, which is strange saying, you know, and I've done it for nothing other than the fact that I love this place. I grew up here, and I just want the best for the city of Glendale. So I really appreciate staff and city for everything they do, and I appreciate my fellow commissioners. I do have one brief comment regarding a situation that's going on that I would like to bring to everybody's attention, and that is what's currently going on between Azerbaijan and Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. You know, it's happening a world away. I have never been to Armenia. It's something that I hope to rectify. I was born here in the United States and had never had the opportunity to go to Armenia. But some of the comments, the only reason I bring it up is some of the comments that I'm seeing being made by world leaders and others is really, really, really concerning to me. You know, having comments by the president of Turkey talking about how he's working to make sure that what their grandfather started is completed, that is troubling is not a strong enough word. That man is referring directly to genocide, and he's talking about you know, completing that, and we've already seen the impacts of that, not just here in the United States, but even locally in Los Angeles. Just recently, a couple days ago, there was a protest where there were Azerbaijani or counter protesters. I don't know what exactly their race or ethnicity were. Counter protesters who had weapons that thankfully were addressed by you know, the LAPD, but it's really scary. It's scary. That's in our backyard. I mean, we're the third largest city in Los Angeles County, fourth now, Santa Clarita. Fourth largest city in Los Angeles County in terms of population, you know, behind LA, Long Beach, and Santa Clarita. That's our backyard, and that's terrifying. You know, I understand that some of these divisions go really, really deep, but it's very, very important that I take this really seriously, and I have this opportunity to do this, and you know, and I appreciate everybody humoring me on this. I strongly condemn any you know, threats of violence against a person based upon immutable characteristics. It doesn't matter what those immutable characteristics are. You know what? There's way too many. We get lost in these days with groups and tribalization, and really we forget about individuals and how individuals are impacted. And every single entity is a person, a human being. It doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter if they're a man or a woman. It doesn't matter what their religion is. They're an individual who has had their own struggles, and so I strongly condemn what I'm hearing, and I hope that our law enforcement and city management are taking some of these issues really seriously, because it's right on our backyard. And I would hate to see that bleed over into what is the largest Armenian enclave outside of Armenia. So thank you for that. And last but not least, Ms. Chalaspanian, Mary, thank you so much for everything that you've done and your service. I know that we kept you over on your last day, but I guess that changes nothing. That's probably par for the course. And I hope that you enjoy your retirement, well-deserved retirement. And on behalf of the committee, I'd just like to say thank you so much for your service to this city that we all love so much. And we hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful and long, healthy retirement.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate, there's a lot of sincerity in those words. I appreciate it. I am a Glendale resident. I'm a proud resident of this jewel city, and I have a home here. I've lived here a very long time. I immigrated here when I was 10 years old from Lebanon. So I've lived in this beautiful city for a long time, and I worked in the city too. So I'm proud, I'm very proud. And thank you so much. It was an honor being the secretary to the Audit Committee. And I wish I could have done it for a much longer time, but I think it's time. 37 years is a fairly good amount of time. Thank you so much.
It's more than fairly good. It's exemplary, exceptional, outstanding, and we thank you for your service. And really, words aren't enough, but I know that you know how much staff and the people that you've worked with over that time appreciate you and your professionalism and just the manner in which you've gone about your business. Thank you so much on behalf of the Audit Committee. We really appreciate it. I mean, this isn't enough, but it's all we can give.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you to all the members and commissioners. Thank you. And the staff.
Yes. Okay. If there are no other comments?
May I add to,
yes,
to that?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say to Mary, thank you very much for your service and support to internal audit and now IPA. So even though we're only part of the finance department for like 2.5 years, about 2.5 years, our office has always been located within finance, and we have always been included as part of the finance family. And for many years, Mary has been our go-to person for a lot of tasks that we need help with. Mary is always upbeat and has always taken great care of us. So thank you. And Mary has served the secretary to the Audit Committee, I think since its inception in 1997. So as a secretary to the Audit Committee for the past 23 years, She has always made sure that the meeting was scheduled, conference room was booked, agenda was posted, and the minutes were completed on time. So she maintained a great records. Every time we need to find information that no one else could remember, Mary had a copy of the document with the answer. So Mary, on behalf of Internal Audit and the IPA, thank you so much for all your hard work, support, and friendship. We'll miss you very much.
Yes, thank you. I will miss every single one of you. I truly will. And I will come and visit.
Absolutely, absolutely, and there might be an opportunity, to get in there and just introduce a meeting or something. I'm kidding.
Why not?
No, I'm kidding. Yes, Miss Flynn.
If I might add to that, last but not least, Mary, you know how much you mean to me and all of your finance family. And in your 37 years here at the city, you've worked for 5 different finance directors, and I've had the pleasure of being the one these last few years, last year actually. Feels like a lot longer this past few months. You've been able to master your assignments, and you're the Munis queen of cashiering and teaching us how to crochet, making all those baby blankets for the finance babies, and taking care of a lot of our celebrations in our department. And if it's one thing that we do well in finance, not only keeping the books straight, but we know how to have nice parties with a lot of food. Mary's been instrumental in doing that, leading us through that, and always 110% dedicated, making sure we take pictures and memorialize those events. So you know that you're going to be so missed by a lot of people in the city, Mary. A lot of people know you. A lot of people have retired that you're still friends with, and I know you're going to keep those friendships for a long time. But your finance family is going to miss you the most, for sure. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for all your service to the city of Glendale and its community and to our department. We wish you the best, and we do expect to see you on our future celebrations. So you make sure you stay local, and we can keep in touch, okay?
Yes, thank you so much. Those are very kind words, really. I truly appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. I will come and visit. I won't be a stranger. I live local, so thank you again, every single one of you. Thank you for the kind words. I will not forget any one of you. Thank you.
And with that, let's move on to item number 8, please.
Item number 8 is new business.
Okay, hearing none, move on to item number 9.
Adjournment.
Move adjournment.
Second that.
We are adjourned. Thank you.